So we're going to stand up here because I don't think that this stage was actually designed with end users who wear heels in mind. So thanks for having us. My name is Alli Gerkman. This is Logan Cornett. We are with ILES. I oversee our work related to the legal profession. Logan is our senior research analyst, and ILES is the Institute for the Advancement of the American Legal System. Today we're going to talk to you about one of our projects, and we chose this project specifically because it actually has had a couple iterations and has even taken us in some new directions, so it seemed like a good one to look at because we've been through the motions with it. So that said, I'm going to start by talking to you about the problem. So I don't want to ruin your mornings, but about 40 to 50% of first marriages actually end in divorce. And the reason I share this is because what that means is a lot of people interact with our system, maybe for the first time and possibly for the only time, when they are going through this incredibly emotional experience of getting divorced. This is a big way that people are accessing the system. And unfortunately, and I say unfortunately because the system really wasn't designed for them, in about 80 to 90% of these cases, one of the parties is self-represented. At least one of the parties is self-represented. And we know, because in a study a couple years ago, we talked to some self-represented litigants, that this can actually be a really traumatizing experience. This self-represented litigant actually talked to us about how it can feel like you are actually in a dark room and you're just kind of bumping into stuff and asking for help, and someone maybe shines a light down one direction and you can walk in that direction, but no one ever actually just turns on the light to let you see the whole process and what you're dealing with. And it's not just the couple that is going through this. Often it's also children. Approximately 1.5 million children are the children of divorcing parents in any given year. And that's not just a number, it's also attached to some real negative impacts for children. Children have negative emotional states that can develop from this, including stress, anxiety, depression, and these are things that can last even beyond childhood on into adulthood. And so if we haven't begun to tug on your heartstrings with the self-represented litigants who are trying to navigate the process, and the children who are being strung along through a process that may be unnecessarily challenging to their parents, perhaps we can tug on your purse strings. So it's estimated that there's about 1/3 of $1 trillion that goes into either direct costs related to divorce or indirect costs, things like loss of productivity, which is a lot of cost to society taken as a whole, not just that final number, but the cost that we see to parents and to children. So all of this is this is a huge problem. And there are any number of ways to look at it. I mean, you could say, well, let's get rid of divorce. That's not what we did. What we did is we instead said, is there a way that we could actually make the process easier, more accessible, and less traumatizing for all of the parties involved? And so we did what we do at ILES, which is we brought together a group of experts. We brought together lawyers, judges, social workers, psychologists, financial planners. You'll note there is one group I just didn't say, right? Divorcing parties, but we'll get to that. Logan's going to talk to that in just a moment because we do get there. We brought those folks together and we hammered out a thing. We hammered out something called the Resource Center for Separating and Divorcing Families, and what we did with that is it was a system where divorcing parties who had children and who were willing to work together toward an outcome together, could come in and get access not just to legal help and legal education to help them move through the process and legal drafting and mediation, but also to counseling, to co-parent coaching and counseling for adults and for children. And we tried to pull together all of these things that would make the process more navigable and more sort of doable on a human level. And by the way, we brought all this together in a place that was not in the courtroom, not in the adversarial setting of a courtroom, but instead on the university campus where they were working with licensed professionals who were also supervising graduate students from schools of social work, psychology, and the law school. What we found, what we did is we actually evaluated the experiences that people had, and for that, I'm going to turn it over to Logan.
Can I have the clicker, please, Alli? Okay, so is this on? Can you hear me? Okay. So what we did, of course, is we wanted to know how well the system that we designed worked for the people that were using it. And so obviously a question that we asked was, what were the well-being outcomes for these parents that were using the system? And we found several statistically significant improvements, including things like improved shared decision-making skills, improved communication skills, meaning higher degrees of collaboration, lower degrees of violence between the two parties, increases in the confidence in their co-parenting relationship, and an increase in appropriate emotional expectations for their children. That came along with decreases in things like stress, anxiety, and depression, decreased levels of acrimony between the parents, decreased levels of parenting stress, and decreases in parents reporting of their children's internalized anxiety and depression. We also wanted to know what parents thought about their experience at the center, and we found people were really generally quite satisfied with their experiences. More than 95% of folks told us that the center had either a good or neutral impact on themselves, their family, and their children. In addition to that, a full 98% of folks said that they were able to come to full agreement with the other party on finances, decision-making responsibilities, and parenting time. So what's the problem then? We were having trouble getting people in the door, right? So it seems like we missed that desirability piece. Indeed, after 2 years on campus, university funding ran out, so what we decided to do was transition the center into the community off the campus, and the idea here was that given our positive outcome data and our positive feedback from parents, we retained the basic structure of the model, but replaced the student service providers with just licensed professionals. Meanwhile, in a separate project, as Alli alluded to earlier, we were undertaking a qualitative study of self-represented litigants who had gone through the family court process. And what we heard from them is that, of course, fairly unsurprisingly, one of their main motivations in not hiring an attorney is the cost. But people also wanted to retain control over the process, and they also wanted to preserve whatever degree of, friendliness is still between them and the other party. In terms of what they told us were the difficult things in the process, we heard that understanding the process, the quote that Alli gave us earlier, people don't understand what the process looks like, and many people said they didn't even understand once they were at the end of the process what the process was. So some other things that were difficult for them, of course, are filling out forms and paperwork, and even understanding what forms and paperwork needed to be filled out, understanding the legal jargon, all of that stuff. Also court appearances. What do I say to the judge? How do I interact with the other party in court? How do I interact with the other party's attorney if they have one? What do I wear to court? These kinds of things. And then another fairly unsurprising finding, but interesting nonetheless, is that the most common place that people go for information about how to get through their case is the internet. So, fast forward about a year, and through these design thinking sorts of exercises that we have done, we decided that we would start the Court Compass project. And what we wanted to do here is gather what we had learned from the out-of-court divorce model and from our long-form discussions with self-represented litigants, and use that information to sort of start building out a plan for an online navigator system that will provide the resources that people want, that they have told us that they want. That's the key. So at this point, we're envisioning a tool that provides these things, but not limited to step-by-step information about the process, online mediation and dispute resolution between the parties, document assembly services, counseling resources and referrals, lawyer referrals if that's what people are interested in, and chatbots and other AI that can really guide people through the process. And so as Alli mentioned earlier, we're really moving towards a system where instead of just gathering a bunch of experts at the beginning and using their guidance, we're starting with the users now. So our first step, as I said, is taking the research that we already have. The second step is we've completed a preliminary market research survey to figure out what services people would be willing to use online. Our next step is gathering interdisciplinary design teams to develop prototypes. Then we're going to test those prototypes with real self-represented litigants, and then we're going to hopefully pilot this first iteration in at least one jurisdiction. So we hope that you guys will stay tuned as we hopefully really hit that desirability piece.